is up, everybody? Welcome back to Squeeze the Juice. Another week, another episode. This is the official post-draft analysis, thoughts, questions, concerns. We are happy to have Tyler, a.k.a. Fueled by Motown, back for another week, another great episode. Even though it's after the draft, if you didn't go see our last one, go check it out. You can see our thoughts beforehand, see how it compared. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about it today, but yeah, go check that one out. But it's going to be another great one today. We're going to compare our previous draft with the current one. We'll get into more deep thoughts about it, as well as talking about our hometown Detroit Lions and how we thought about their draft. Some good picks, some bad picks. You know, it's looked at as Detroit being a very high concern, but also high intrigue to many people.
Very polarizing draft.
Yes, that's a good word to use. A very good word to use. But welcome back. How we doing? How we feeling today?
I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling okay. I feel better today than I did on Friday, and I'm feeling better. I felt better on Friday than I did on Thursday. So we're slowly improving the mood based off of really the Lions draft, but also in general, I think, getting a sense around what's happening in the league, because let's face it, even as Lions fans, you have to pay attention to what everyone else is doing too in the draft. And there is some cause for concern just based on how we're going to be able to compete. But overall, I'm feeling better today than I did the day before and the day before that. So overall, okay.
Good.
I'll just say before we get into the weeds of everything, this was a very unique draft in general. And so I think it caused for some unpredictability by a lot of people. And it sounded like even the teams themselves were uncertain how things were going to shake out. It's draft weekend, so it's always a good time. I'm always feeling good about the draft. It's always my favorite time of the sports year.
It's the most wonderful time.
So yeah, we'll get into the specifics.
Yeah. How do we want to go about it? Do we want to go through our first round comparison and then get into the Lions? Or just,
we can do
just
that.
because the
let's do that
just
first.
because then you know who they took, and then we can kind of get into it.
Yep.
So we got the first, so it's visible. We got the first comparison of our draft to the actual draft. We got the first 7 on the board. First off, at least in our draft, I selected Bryce Young. That was kind of the automatic. No, everyone thought, unless they thought otherwise, which it ended up being Bryce Young to Carolina. How do we feel about the pick? Probably, for the most part, a home run.
A-plus pick, Bryce Young, phenomenal talent, very instinctive. We talked about it beforehand. We love Bryce Young. The only thing that you can knock on him is the size, but he's been playing at that height for years now, and he's done it at the highest level at the best university when it comes to football. So I'm not too worried. No real... in terms of the first 7, there's really not many surprises, except maybe one. But, it went almost... we weren't too far off in how it went down, really, when you look at it.
Yeah.
Bryce went 1, obviously. Stroud, I think, was a little bit of a shocker, but he was the second-best quarterback in the draft.
And you had to wait and see what he was
Exactly.
really going to do it, too, because we didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think... obviously, we didn't predict any trades, and so the fact that there was movement in the top 10 made things a little bit more complicated with comparing our mock. But, Evan's right. We kept it pretty close to where it was going to be. The only real significant miss was Will Levis.
That was the only one.
Evan and I were questioning, but it was funny because heading into the final day, heading into the draft, Will Levis started skyrocketing in Vegas to be a top 3 pick, and turned out that just wasn't the case, and even Vegas didn't know what was going to happen.
It also could be a very interesting factor. We didn't know much about it, but his foot/toe injury
issue, some weird. They didn't really specify. Didn't go into too much detail, but I mean, Levis, I think if Richardson was off the board, I do think Levis would have went to the Colts. Like, if it was quarterback, right? Let's say Tennessee trade up to 3 to take Stroud or Richardson. I do think Will Levis would have went to Indy at 4. So I'm not going to knock you. I do think Indy was going to take a quarterback regardless. It could have been the number 1 QB on their board. It could have been the number 4 QB on the board. They were going to take a quarterback.
Yeah.
So I do not really fault you for sticking to it with Levis because I do think, it made the most sense. But
well, it's not like any of us knew he was going to fall as far as he did.
exactly.
So.
Nobody predicted that. I mean,
everyone expected him to be a first-round pick, no matter what.
I'm not going to clown you for him being a second-round pick.
No, I mean...
Although I kind of want to, but I'm not,
you can.
I'm not going to.
Yeah, I mean, Houston obviously moving up to 3 and getting
that was a big
quarterback
shock.
And Will Anderson.
I love that move.
Was a great move by Houston, and they could afford to do it because they had all the ammunition from the Deshaun Watson trade. So they were one of the few teams that could trade back into the top 5 and it not hurt their future by much at all. So it was just a great move. Now they have their cornerstone on offense and defense. So, I mean, me, Evan, and Justin, texted about it during the draft, and we all loved that move by them. So they were clearly had a goal in mind to start their new regime off with some cornerstone pieces, and I think that they got the best defensive player, and you could argue the best quarterback, but I think we could all agree definitely top 3 quarterback in this class.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's pretty wild they traded up. So the comparison, Bryce Young worked out pretty well. We had Anderson at 2.
Right team.
Which is pretty much correct, but we weren't expecting the trade.
They could have flipped. They could have just taken Anderson at 2, traded up to 3, and get Stroud. So
absolutely.
We can call that a half victory.
Yeah. That's what we set on is half credit for that one. Right team, wrong pick.
And then we had Jalen Carter at 3 for the Cardinals, which that could have been anything. If they didn't trade that, they could have taken him. A lot of talk of offensive linemen.
Yeah.
Cardinals did trade back.
Yeah.
Technically, what they traded twice.
Yeah, they did. They
Trade
traded
back
out
to
of 3. Yep. They moved.
And then moved
they
back
moved down to
up.
12, and then they moved back up to 6 to get Paris Johnson with Detroit. So yeah, Detroit even had some movement here, and they end up not selecting at their pick. So
yeah, that was an interesting thing. We didn't know what to expect. Yes, I took Will Levis at 4 to the Colts. Anthony Richardson goes to the Colts, and probably the best fit for him, realistically.
Love that pick.
For
Shane
sure.
Steichen's going to use him just like he used Jalen Hurts. Probably a little bit different because they're not the same.
Right.
Richardson, much more gifted arm talent. But it's going to come down to in between the ears for Anthony Richardson. How well is he going to be able to digest the NFL schemes that are thrown at him defensively, and how well is he going to be able to handle an offense? Because the one thing that Jalen Hurts has that we don't know Richardson has yet is that stellar IQ, the ridiculous leadership that Jalen Hurts possesses. Those are the things that we don't know if Richardson has yet, but everything physically and on the tape, to me at least, shows this guy is going to be a franchised quarterback. He's going to be one of the best game-changing, playmaking quarterbacks for a long time.
Then we go to 5, Seattle. We didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't want Tyree Wilson because there's been some questions, with his health as well, I believe.
Yes, I believe
there was
a foot issue with him.
I think it was either his foot or his knee, but there was some medical concerns according to some reports. So some teams knocked him down their board a little bit. So maybe Seattle was one of those teams.
And Seattle surprisingly took Devin Witherspoon.
I was in the car when this pick was made, and I was very happy when they took Witherspoon at 5. I was pumped up. I thought Jalen Carter was going to go 5, which would have made me, a little sad because I would have. I guess
if we took him, you would have wanted Carter over Witherspoon.
Right. And I did want to see Brad Holmes make a decision on Carter. Like, for better or for worse, I wanted to see him, as the GM of the Detroit Lions, make a decision, put his foot in the ground, and say, I didn't want this guy. He was too much of a concern. And so I liked that aspect as well. But I was very happy Seattle took him. And I do think it helps their secondary. I don't think Witherspoon is I feel like that's a good franchise for him to go to. Just because I think they've had a good track record of developing secondary, guys. I just would have been very fearful of him in a Lions uniform, and I'm glad he is not a Detroit Lion. He can go with Tariq Woolen, and they can, do whatever they got to do in Seattle. I'm very happy.
Tyler?
That's a great tandem with Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen. They're going to shut down opposing passing games for years to come. From everything that we heard post the first round, it was clear to most teams in the top 10 that there were only a few considered blue chip players in this draft, and most teams had Devon Witherspoon as one of those blue chippers, including Will Anderson, and you could consider Bryce Young a blue chipper, and Jalen Carter, which obviously he had the off-the-field concerns. So there was not a whole lot of blue chip prospects in this draft, and Devon Witherspoon was one of them. I would have had absolutely no problem with Detroit taking him if he was there. Of course, he wasn't. But for Seattle, I'll just keep it brief because he's not a Detroit Lion. He's going to be a shutdown corner. He's going to be the CB1, even though Tariq Woolen was up there for Defensive Rookie of the Year, and he's one of the young, up-and-coming corners in the league. Devon Witherspoon's going to be CB1 there, and him and Woolen are going to be a fantastic pairing. So, that was a great pick by Seattle, so I got no problems with it.
And the Lions, we had them taking Witherspoon on our draft, and they ended up trading with the Cardinals so the Cardinals could get back in, and they took Paris Johnson Jr. His father was once there. It's another one of those father-son kind of moments
Legacy
in the NFL. Legacy pick. Paris was really happy. He thought because he heard all the rumors of him possibly going at 3 of the Cardinals. They trade back. He doesn't know what to expect. And he's a Cardinal. I like the pick. Protect
I think
Kyler.
It's a great pick. They have not invested in that offensive line since they drafted Kyler Murray. This is the first sign of, and they have a new GM too. His name is escaping me at the moment, but he took this team over and said, okay, we need to reestablish ourselves. We need to completely find a way to build an identity for this team because there really hadn't been. And I think he did an excellent job. He got a first rounder from Houston next year and 2 third rounders, one from Tennessee and one from Houston. So they stacked capital for next year's draft. They still got their guy in the first round, Paris Johnson Jr., who's going to protect Kyler for the next. Kyler's signed for a long-term deal. They're not going to be able to take a quarterback next year. Kyler Murray's their guy, and you need someone to protect him. Paris Johnson Jr., the best tackle on the board. I think it's a phenomenal pick, and I think it was a phenomenal draft by the Cardinals. I think they hit all their areas of need while stacking capital for the future. It's an A-plus draft for me for Arizona. They did a great job, and that's really, as a new GM, you need to establish yourself. You need to be able to make an imprint, and he did just that. So phenomenal work by him and that whole front office.
This reminds me similarly to how Detroit handled their first draft where they took Penei Sewell. A new regime comes in. You're not trying to swing for the fences. You're trying to take a high floor pick that's just going to be a bookend cornerstone player for long term. So Arizona, I'm sure that they might have heavily considered Anderson if he was there. He wasn't. So they weighed their options with quarterbacks, available no, Will Anderson was there. I'm sorry. And they valued the future, right? They valued the future picks. But yeah, no, I agree with Evan. It was a great move. They add a 1, they add a 3. They moved back up to get their tackle. So, and then we talked about tackle in our last pod, and as the draft approached, it had become very clear that other teams saw Paris Johnson as the clear-cut number 1 tackle. So Arizona wanted to guarantee that they got that, not stay at 12 and take the second or third guy on their board. So they came back up and got him, and they still didn't have to give up any of those premium picks that they acquired in the trade down. So, I like what they did as well. It was a great maneuvering. So
7, the Raiders. We had Stroud, which quite a quite a mishap, but that was, I don't know. We didn't know what to expect. Stroud did end up going to the Texans, so that changed things up. The Raiders took Tyree Wilson. You know, we didn't know where he would go.
We'll see how that fit ends up working out. The Raiders, round 1 is always a tough round for them. For whatever reason, they have not been able to get the first round correct at all. And so while I like Tyree Wilson a lot, this landing spot does concern me just because of their track record. It's not been great. And with the, sudden medical concern, whatever it may be, you do wonder if that impacts his ability to play year 1 or if it will come into if it will be an issue at some point in the season. I think he's got great upside. He's still a tremendous talent. He can. We went over it all. He's going to be able to do a lot, and he's a nice pair with Max Crosby. It's just, do I trust the Raiders? That's my only concern. I don't really have a concern with Tyree Wilson. It's more so the team that took him, which is unfortunate, to say, but it's true.
Fair enough. Tyler, any statements?
nope.
All right. On to the next 7, 8 through 14. We got the Falcons. What the heck with the Falcons, man?
I did mention Bijan. Like I said, this is what I want to do. But I did say I think they'll go Bijan. They went Bijan. I still think Lucas Van Ness would have been the better pick. And it's clear that he was the next best edge because the Green Bay Packers took him at 13 and Nolan Smith went 30th. So I wasn't too far off there. I wanted to defend myself with honor about Lucas Van Ness because I think he's going to be a really good player. I disagree with the Bijan pick completely. I don't understand it from Atlanta's perspective. They are not in a position to add a running back. The team at 12, who, like I said, running back is an interesting pick in the first round. It is. It's just positional value. There's a lot of concerns when you do take a running back in the first round. But if the right team takes a running back in the first round, then you can stomach it, it can make sense, and it could work in the here and now. For Atlanta, Bijan's super talented. Probably he might be the most talented player in the draft. It just doesn't make sense when you don't have a quarterback. I'm sorry, I'm not buying the Desmond Ridder hype train. And that defense still has nothing to address like their defensive line. They did not do anything to address the defensive line. They need someone to attack the passer, and they don't have that still. So it made no sense to me. But he's super talented, and he'll put up some fantasy stats. So if that's what Atlanta cares about, then it's a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, Arthur Smith comes from Tennessee, where he had Derrick Henry. So his offense, he would love to build around a similar offense to Tennessee, where they build around the running back in the running game. So I understand it. I don't love the value either. I don't think that they were necessarily in a position or from an organizational standpoint, their roster isn't really set up to take a pick like this. I understand it, but I don't really like it either. I'll refrain from my conversation about the pick at 12 until we get to the Lions. But, yeah, I mean, the value's not great, and you really can't justify it.
So the Bears at 9, we had them taking Peter Skoronski. They traded back one spot with the Eagles, which was weird, but I guess I didn't trust them enough. So instead of taking Skoronski, they swapped back to 10, and the Eagles at 9 took Jalen Carter to join every other player he's ever played with.
It's a good spot for him. He's
I agree.
going to be babysat there, essentially. Like, I don't want to say that about a grown man, but when you have, basically your entire team, and there's been reports that, like, yeah, we kind of carried him in terms of, just from a, I guess, an emotional standpoint, if you want to put it that way, just kind of like from a mental perspective. That kind of says all I need to know. He is going to be in Georgia, or he's going to, well, basically Georgia, but he's going to be in Philly, where he is going to be in a situation that will allow him to feel comfortable, be himself, and he's going to be held accountable by guys he's known for a while now. So Howie Roseman does it again. He's a wizard. He's a genie. He's a voodoo. He's crazy. I tremendous value. If you're just talking about the player, Jalen Carter, is probably the number one guy. And it makes me sick how good of a pick this is.
Well, yes, it's a great pick, but it could only work in with certain teams.
Agreed.
And so Philly is afforded the luxury of them being one of those very few teams where Jalen Carter has the highest chance of panning out and becoming what he's supposed to be. So Philadelphia is absolutely, excited and ecstatic, and I'm sure their fans love the pick. But not any team could have just came up and got him. It had to have been the right fit. So Philly kind of was fortunate that they were one of those few. They really probably didn't have too much competition because a lot of teams that didn't have the culture or the situation to put Jalen Carter in, I'm sure those teams just weren't interested. So it was just kind of a perfect match. So honestly, just for the fact that Jalen Carter is such a talented player, I'm kind of happy that he went to Philly because it's just the highest opportunity for him to work out.
Don't disagree. So the Bears at 10, we had the Eagles at 10 in our draft taking Christian Gonzalez, and the Bears ended up being traded back 1, and they took Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, which you guys really talked about as, arguably the best guy in the draft, or offense, tackle wise.
I was with you, Justin. I like Paris Johnson Jr. more than Darnell Wright, but I think Darnell Wright is a really solid player. I mean, I took him at 17 in our mock with the Steelers because I thought it made sense, and the Steelers did trade up and got Broderick Jones, who's another tackle. So mindset-wise, right on point there, and we were right on point here at the Bears. We thought they were going to get someone to protect Justin Fields. We just didn't get the pick right, but you don't need to get the pick right. It's more so, okay, we're thinking of this kind of line, and we feel like the team need is tackle or someone to protect Fields, and we got that part right. And so that's where, I feel like we got to give ourselves a little bit of credit here, ease the pressure. It wasn't Skoronski, but it was still an offensive lineman, and a damn good one in Darnell Wright. I think he projects as a phenomenal talent. He's got to work on some things, but Chicago's got their guy to protect their franchise quarterback, and I think, it's a slam dunk pick, really. Anyone along the offensive line I would have given them a thumbs up for because they needed someone on that line.
Any comments?
No, we can keep moving.
To 11, the Titans stay there.
A boy.
We had them taking A-Rich in our mock, and they got Pete Skoronski, or Peter, to them. Great pick.
It is a phenomenal pick. That offensive line was horrible last year, and they lost Taylor Lewan. Well, they let him go, but you know what I mean. And this just makes too much sense. Skoronski's a great pick.
Enough said.
Complaints,
Enough said. Well, to 12. 12 was held by Houston, and we took Quentin Johnston with that pick in our mock, but it was traded to Arizona for Houston to move up, and then Arizona traded at 2. The Lions moved back to 12 and took the second running back on the board, Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. So you can say, kind of lightly what your thoughts are, because we'll get into all Detroit talk in a bit.
I'll just keep it moving, so I'll hold off on my Jahmyr Gibbs
I will also
take.
hold off.
Okay,
So
we'll get into that after.
Yep.
So, the 13 in the Marmock drafts, the Jets had it, and we had them taking Paris Johnson there. The Packers traded up, correct? And
It was with the Rodgers trade.
the Rodgers trade.
swaps.
Oh, yeah, Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
We may talk a little for a second about that.
So the Jets moved back to 15, and the Packers moved up to 13 on the pick swap.
And the Packers took Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa.
I think that's a great pick.
I agree.
Yep.
No complaints here by any of us. 14, the Pats. We had them taking JSN in our mock, and they ended up trading back with the Steelers. Steelers came up, like Evan said a moment ago, to get their offensive tackle at Georgia, Broderick Jones, which was heavily needed to protect Pickett. It was a great pick.
I think the Steelers were, in my heart, I think Broderick Jones probably wasn't their number one tackle on the board, but I think that they had this thought process, look, and that's why they trade up, look, we need to get a tackle here. We need to get somebody that's going to be a bookend on the line. And I still believe truly that it would have been Darnell Wright if he was there, but if he was there at 14 even. But to get Broderick Jones, I think that's a nice consolation prize. You get a guy that's going to be able to protect Kenny Pickett, like you said. It just makes too much sense.
Yeah, there was a run on tackles, and they came up and jumped the Jets because the reports were that the Jets were eyeing Broderick Jones. So Steelers came up and leaped the Jets to make sure that they got their tackle. So no complaints, and
They could have had him
pick.
without the Aaron Rodgers trade.
That's what everyone was saying. So that's what you get. They got Aaron Rodgers, though. So
All right. I'm just going to drop down here real quick. These are quick, too. Our 15-16. We had the Packers in ours at 15 before they traded. With the Jets, we had them taking Dalton Kincaid from Utah. But they swapped with the Jets, and the Jets took Will McDonald out of Iowa State.
This was an odd pick. Will McDonald, I think maybe he'll fit Robert Saleh's scheme somehow, some way, but it was interesting. But, I mean, there was a few interesting picks in the first round, so I'm not going to bash the Jets for making this pick. If they got their guy, they got their guy. But I do think the Jets, when you hear reports that they wanted Jahmyr Gibbs, they wanted Broderick Jones, I think when you kind of sit there and don't make a move, and now you're kind of caught in this weird spot where, okay, look, the two guys that we were thinking of getting are no longer there, you're kind of left
holding the bag.
Yeah, you're left holding the bag. You're left in the cold. It seems like a disappointment more than anything, because I think they needed somebody to go and protect Rodgers. They didn't get that. They got Will McDonald. We'll see how he fares, but it's just an odd spot for the Jets to find themselves in.
It was odd, too, because they just took Jermaine Johnson last year that they were so excited about. So, I mean, they're loaded at defensive line, and they couldn't even get Jermaine Johnson that many snaps last year because they were so loaded. So this pick just didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but maybe they couldn't find a trade back, and they just took the top talent on their board. That's kind of what it seems like. So, yeah, I agree with Evan. It definitely appears as though they were targeting some guys, and they missed out on all their targets and just ended up having to stay and take what they had. So, I mean, didn't love the pick, but we'll see what happens.
All right. So next we got the Commanders. In our draft, we had them taking Deontay Banks, which they probably should have done. Yeah. But they took Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, Forbes is a good corner. It's not a terrible pick, but there were better corners on the board. That's the problem. Emmanuel Forbes is a ball hawk. He's small, but he's long, and he has a nose for the football. That's undoubted. That you can't doubt. But he's small. He's not going to be a physical corner. He's not really going to be like a great shutdown corner. He's going to be like a turnovers guy. So if he's not producing turnovers for you, he's not going to be a great corner. You had Joey Porter. You had Deontay Banks on the board. Was Gonzalez on the board at this point?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Gonzalez. So, for Forbes to be the second corner off the board, it's just not a great value, but we'll see.
Well, shout out Justin. You got the corner spot right though with the Commanders. That is the position they took. We don't have to love the guy they took.
Yeah,
because I don't. I don't
it was
know.
a bit of a
I don't know what they
reach.
saw in Forbes that they didn't see.
He's more of a beginning of second round kind of pick.
It made no sense to me when Gonzo's on the board, JPJ's on the board, Deontay Banks is on the board. I think there was other options at the cornerback position that, if Emmanuel Forbes is their top guy, go ahead, take him. But I just don't know what they were thinking, taking him over some of the other guys. If you liked him so much, I think you could have traded back.
Probably.
But you can say that for a lot of guys. But
I don't know. I saw a video. Ron Rivera was in a car really talking about hyping up Emmanuel Forbes and how he liked him. So I don't know.
Commanders are typically unconventional as a franchise, so it's not surprising that they went unconventional with their first-round draft pick.
I mean, if he causes turnovers and he's a ball hawk and he's getting you 5, 6, 7 interceptions a season, no one's going to be complaining about where they took him. So.
That's true.
True. All right, to 17. Pittsburgh, at the time, without a trade, did have it. We had them taking Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. They did trade it to the Patriots, and the Patriots were back at 17, and they did take Christian Gonzalez. Love the pick. Love the value.
It's great value.
Yeah, phenomenal value. The best athlete, or one of the best athletes in the draft, probably. And what you're getting in Gonzalez is a 6'2 corner who can run a 4.3 speed and can be a very nice chess piece for Bill Belichick. I think he's going to slide in right to that CB1 spot. They still got some phenomenal talent there in the back end too. Kyle Duggar, Jack Jones, Jonathan Jones. Like, he's coming into a situation where he doesn't need to be the cornerback one, but he's going to be because that's how talented he is. I think it's a perfect landing spot for him. And the Patriots defense, they stacked this draft on defense. They addressed it immediately. Not that it was the biggest concern, but they said, you know what?
We're
in a
war.
division with Josh Allen, Tua, and Rodgers. I don't think our offense can compete with them, but what can we do? We can fortify our defense and make life a living hell for the other three quarterbacks in the division. I think that's exactly what they did.
Belichick just drafts chess pieces, and then he just salivates over the offseason just figuring out all fun ways to use them and how to, confuse opposing offenses. So that's definitely their approach this draft was he was just giving himself all these fun pieces to play with. So, yeah, Gonzalez was a great value.
18, Lions kept it. We had them remarkably taking Bijan.
Yeah.
And probably would have been the smarter place at this point, for any running back to go, right? Mm-hmm. Realistically. At 18, we did keep the pick and take Jack Campbell out of Iowa.
Yeah, we'll do the same thing. We can hold off talking Lions.
Yeah.
We'll do a whole Lions review here. So
after this. So we'll get into that after.
Definitely a little unexpected.
Give me that hitter, baby.
Elijah Cansey banger right here.
I picked them to take Tampa to take them, and they took them at 19 precisely. Love that pick.
Phenomenal work.
Great pick by them, too.
Yeah.
Good Tampa draft. 20, the Seahawks did keep their pick. We had Nolan Smith, edge out of Georgia. I think that would have been a good pick, but he had to join the Philly Bulldogs crew later on. And 20 in the draft, Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, interesting. Seattle did not address their defensive line at all in the first round. Very similar to the Lions, but you cannot deny JSN super talented. The top wide receiver on the board, I think he's going to be a nice compliment to DK Metcalf, and he offers something similar to Lockett, but I think he isn't the same player as Lockett. So I really like what Geno Smith has around him now. They've really insulated him with as much talent as possible. It's a great pick. I really like JSN. Little sad that the Pats didn't take him, but I was still very happy with Gonzalez. And he goes to a spot where I think he'll thrive. So good pick on my end here.
Absolutely. And after that, we got the Chargers at 21, taking Zay Flowers in our draft. Mm-hmm. Close, very close, because they ended up taking Quentin Johnston, which I didn't expect them to take Johnston, honestly.
Yeah. It's the archetype of receiver that they go for. They like big body guys that can run, and that's exactly what QJ is. Want to see his hands improve. I want to see him be able to high point the ball more, but he has all the physical tools, and he's great after the catch. If he can put it all together, he's going to be a nice piece for them and for Herbert. They needed somebody else in that offense, and they got him in QJ. So I like this pick, but I need to see more from QJ at the next level.
It was interesting how long it took for a receiver to come off the board in the first place. Most people had JSN as like a lock to be like a top 12 to 15 pick. And it was interesting. We didn't see a wide receiver go till pick 20, and then once one did, 4 picks in a row, we saw a receiver, which I think I heard that had never happened in the common draft eras. 4 receivers in the first round go all back to back to back.
I believe it.
So, yeah, I think once Jackson Smith and Jigba went, everybody just took their guy. And, yeah, I agree with Evan. I mean, Quentin Johnston, big body, definitely needs to work on his hands. But, yeah, I think he'll be a great receiver for him. And then Zay Flowers, that was a great pick for Baltimore for sure. I think that's a good fit. Interestingly enough, he's very similar style and size to like a Hollywood Brown, so that might be like their replacement for that. But yeah, I mean, you just signed Lamar Jackson right before the draft began to a massive extension, so they were definitely like, we got to build around Lamar. And I think in our previous episode, I said that I didn't think Lamar would have any, play any factor in their pick, but clearly he did. Baltimore wants to keep their man happy, so they gave him a receiver opposite Odell.
And a reference before that, we in our draft took Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah.
The Ravens did.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was saying he was still on the board here, but they really wanted Zay, so.
I think it was a smarter move. I think
Yeah.
it's what they needed more, a receiver. Vikings at 23. We had a juicy Hendon Hooker going 23. We'll chatter about that later. But Jordan Addison goes to the Vikings. Great pick.
I like Addison. I thought this was a good pick for Minnesota. I do think that Hendon Hooker was on their radar to some extent. Now, I took him here because it felt like Hendon Hooker was leaning towards being a first-round pick. Now, I disagree with that completely. I would not have taken him in the first or second round. But I just kind of said, you know what? Minnesota needs to find their next guy. I think it could be Hendon Hooker. They have the 23 or the 23rd overall pick. Might as well take a swing at it. But I think Addison, for right now, they lost Adam Thielen. I think adding a guy opposite Jetta's, keeping, that offense going, instead of having it stall, I think was important. So they have to compete in the NFC North. They cannot just sit on their hands and do nothing. Addison's a solid pick here. I really like Addison.
I like Addison too because he's gonna play the slot, and so that'll open up the outside for Justin Jefferson to work. Justin Jefferson will open up the middle for Addison to work. I think they're gonna complement each other really well. So I definitely think Addison's style and Justin Jefferson's style complement each other way better than Jefferson and Thielen's ever did. So I think that that's a massive upgrade for them.
So, to 24. The Giants traded to get here.
Yeah,
correct?
They moved up one spot with
Yeah.
Jacksonville.
Yep.
And then Jacksonville ended up trading
They traded back one spot and then traded back again
with the Bills.
Buffalo. Yep.
So at 24, we had the Jacksonville Jaguars at that point taking Broderick Jones, tackle out of Georgia. Deontay Banks finally gets taken by the Giants. Amazing pick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they add to the defense. I think the Giants were probably going best player available. And that's why they moved up one spot. They wanted to get their top guy on their board. And I do think, after that run of receivers where the Giants might have been interested, they end up taking the guy that I'm going to assume was the top guy on their board, and Deontay Banks. And he's a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal corner, great press coverage too. I think he's going to do nicely in Wink Martindale's defensive scheme. It's a good pick for the Giants. I hate to say it.
Banks is one of my favorite players in the draft, so I absolutely love the pick, and I'll just leave it at that.
25, where the Giants were in our draft, they did have Jordan Addison. That could have been potential, like Evan just mentioned. The Bills end up having the pick and take Dalton Kincaid. Amazing pick. He screams Buffalo.
Yeah, love this pick. I was very high on Kincaid when we did our mock. Tyler had him at 15 to the Packers, and I was like, yeah, I could totally see that working. I think he finds himself in a beautiful spot in Buffalo. It's a nice tight end pairing with Knox, who's a bit more of a red zone guy. Kincaid, a yak guy. I think that's a nice piece for Allen. And somebody opposite, an outside guy. It feels like they have all these, same prototype receivers. You add a guy that's just completely unlike what you have in Kincaid. I think it's a good pick by the Bills and by Brandon Beane. Hopefully he will stop complaining about trying to find a good player in the first round like he did at the end of the season.
Absolutely. Cowboys at 26, they stay there. We had them taking Drew Sanders out of Arkansas, and they
Yikes.
take another Michigan man in Mozzie Smith. I don't know if I'd enjoy it. Not a bad pick, but
I don't mind it. It's not the best value, but that was clearly their top defensive tackle on their board. He's a fantastic run stopper, and he provides pass rushing upside. So I think most people had him as like an early second, but taking him in the back end of the first just to guarantee you get him, I got no problems with.
Yeah, if they really liked Mozzie, I'm not going to, be critical of their decision-making there. I do think it's a little peculiar that they took Mozzie Smith, just because I do like the guys behind him a little bit more. I like the versatility of Myles Murphy. I think Brian Brisset, who went through such a tragic year, I think I like him more along the defensive line. But if Mazio was their guy, he was their guy. It's as simple as that.
And they got him. So, 27, the Bills had the pick before they traded it to Jacksonville. We had Jahmyr Gibbs being taken by Buffalo. The Jaguars take Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. I think it's a good pick. Next offensive tackle on the board. Keep Lawrence protected.
I think it's a vanilla pick. I'm a little disappointed Jacksonville didn't try to get a little bit more aggressive here. Maybe help out Lawrence in adding a weapon on the outside. I do like Christian Kirk and I like Calvin Ridley, but I do think maybe they could have done a little bit something more. I think they made this pick because their tackle, Jawan Taylor, got suspended for PEDs, and so they kind of got pigeonholed into taking a tackle, someone that can replace.
Was it Jawan Taylor or was it?
I might have.
It wasn't
misspoke.
Taylor. I forget
It was,
who but it was one of their tackles.
Yeah, one of their I think Jawan Taylor's on the Chiefs now.
Yeah.
Their other tackle, I'm forgetting his name.
Yeah.
But he's suspended, so I feel like this pick was made solely to replace him almost, like at least for the time being. So that's why I maybe am a little disappointed, but I do agree. I'm never going to complain if you go tackle in the first round. I think it's always smart to protect your quarterback, but it does feel like they kind of got stuck making this pick, which makes me a little disappointed. I think they could have added somebody else on that offense or maybe in the defense, but I'm not going to complain either way. I just would, I wanted to see a little bit more out of Duval.
Gotcha. At 28, the Bengals kept the pick. We had them taking Brian Branch in ours, and they take the edge, Miles Murphy. I think it was a smart pick. I think he'll work out well. Obviously, you'd question a lot of the safety players, that they lost a lot of the, their secondary in free agency, but I still love the pick.
I mean, they got guys, who they got, Daxton Hill. So he didn't really see the field much. I think he's going to step right into Jesse Bates' role. They added a secondary guy in the second round, I believe. DJ Turner, so another Michigan guy. I think it's important to have a Miles Murphy, someone that is versatile, can get to the quarterback. I mean, we had him going 29. I would have been totally fine if they took Brian Branch here. Very happy where we ended up. But no, I think Miles Murphy's a phenomenal pick. I think this is good value, and like we kind of said, we kind of had him dropping this far, and that's right where he went. So I think this is a good pick for Cincinnati.
They did end up addressing safety later on, taking Jordan Battle from Alabama, who I know Justin's a big fan of. So they were able to address that to an extent, and like Evan said, they're going to have their first-round pick from last year,
Daxton Hill.
Hill slide in.
They probably like Branch, but they're just like, we need this more, so we'll take his partner in crime Battle.
There's more than one way to help out your secondary, and getting a guy that can get after the quarterback is the primary way of doing so.
Absolutely. So fortunately, we had Miles Murphy going next to the Saints, but they take his partner in crime. Maybe the Saints would have taken him if he was there, but they take Brian Bresee, or Breesy, whatever you want to call it, at 29. I think it works.
Super good dude. Such a tragic story with his little sister passing away. Nothing more can be said about Brian Bresee. I think he's a really good player. I think maybe teams fell out of love with him as, because I think it was more so top 20
injury
early
issues
in the process. But yeah, injury concerns.
Yep.
Not a ton of production his last year at Clemson. But at the end of the day, I still think this is a really good player. And I think the Saints do well considering, they could have had Jalen Carter if they didn't trade, for Chris Olave last year.
He was the number one ranked prospect in his high school class, so he's got all the talent in the world. Just didn't produce his last year, but had off-the-field reasons. So I think the Saints were willing to give him a pass, but very talented player. Would not be surprised if he ends up being a top player for them.
To 30, we got Philly. We have them taking Osiris Torrance, and they end up taking Nolan Smith, the edge out of Georgia, to keep Jalen Carter, who they took earlier, in check and join him with all their fellow Bulldogs. It seems like it worked out well. I think it'll be good.
The slide on Osiris Torrance is interesting. I think you're kind of seeing the value of guard in the NFL by the way he slid. I mean, Nolan Smith, interesting that he slid all the way to 30. That is a little concerning to me. just because, why did so many teams pass on Nolan Smith if, everyone in the mock draft community was convinced he was a top 15 player? But you cannot deny he's got talent. Unfortunate injury kind of ended his entire season last year. I mean, Philly's just stacking guys on the defensive line, and even if he doesn't work, I don't think anyone's going to be like, wow, that was a bad pick. Everyone, when they made this pick, was like, what a steal. So, I think if he works or if he's not super productive, it's not really going to matter too much because everyone loved it on draft day. So if he doesn't produce, I don't think anyone's going to bat an eye.
And they ironically end up taking Keely Ringo later on.
Yeah.
They're just pairing it up. But the last pick, 31, the Chiefs had, we all kind of did a combo of this, and we're like, why not throw this out there? We put Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver Tennessee. We were thinking a fast man, deep ball, let him run. And the Chiefs end up taking Felix Enudike Uzoma out of Kansas State.
Local kid, went to Kansas State, so
Nothing wrong.
yeah.
No complaints.
Get after the QB. Shocking, Jalen Hyatt fell to 73. 73.
To the Giants.
But no, I think, get in a pass rusher. We'll see if they got the right guy. It's sometimes tough to find one at 31. We'll see if he ends up panning out for them. But, I mean, they just won the Super Bowl. Come on.
Nothing wrong.
No one's going to complain if this is a bad pick or not. They're champs.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah. We have no reason to judge the team that drafted Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
But that is the end of the comparison between the actual draft and our mock draft.
Yeah, I don't think we're too far off.
Not too bad. A lot of close spots.
We landed 24 of the 31 guys drafted in the first round. I mean, everyone on our list here went within the first 2 days, which isn't a shocker. But sometimes you do have those guys that just slide completely out of, just completely out till day 3. We were able to keep it pretty close to the hip here. And I thought we were pretty spot on with, positions and just where it made sense, why it didn't make sense. I feel like we did a really nice job, and that's what happens when you go in depth and you think about it and you have a conversation. I think we did a nice job with the mock. It was never going to be perfect, but I think for what we did without any trades, without knowing, what was going to happen, and one of the more unpredictable drafts, I thought we did all right.
Absolutely. Well, now we'll head on to all Lions draft talk in just a moment. All right, so now we get into the Lions draft, our hometown crew. According to ESPN, it looks like we hit on 4 of the 5 needs, supposedly. I mean, and the one thing that we didn't get, we kind of needed. You could argue the boast. Maybe not. I don't know. Depends on how you're feeling. So we ended up trading back and forth, and we ended up with pick 12. First pick, we take Jahmyr Gibbs. Shocking. No one expected that.
It was the shock of the first round, for sure. My jaw was on the ground. I was absolutely in awe when I heard that name called. So now that we have a couple of days to rest on it,
To marinate.
yeah,
It marinated. It marinated well.
So I said in our mock that there were certain scenarios that could play out where the Lions would kind of be in a really tough position. And unfortunately, that situation played itself out.
It did.
From what we've heard from reports and from what I truly believed going into it, the Lions had a couple of guys that were their targets, and if those guys weren't there, they were hoping to trade back. And those guys that they were hoping to get were on the top, at the top of their list. Will Anderson. Sounds like C.J. Stroud, maybe Anthony Richardson were in the conversation, but their top targets seem to have been Will Anderson and Devon Witherspoon, and those were the 2 guys that they were hunting and hoping fell to them at 6. Those guys weren't there. The shocker of the top 10 was Seattle taking Witherspoon. So So anyway, I won't drag on for too long, but essentially worst case scenario played itself out for Detroit. So what reports came out after the fact that apparently after Witherspoon and Anderson were gone, Detroit was looking at the running backs, Gibbs and Bijan, and it seemed as though they actually preferred Gibbs. So they moved back to a spot where they felt like they could guarantee to get him while also getting back capital. So they moved back to 12. They gained pick 34, which that's a pretty valuable pick.
Absolutely.
So let's not discount that when we're evaluating the Gibbs pick, that it's Gibbs plus 34, right? So they move back and they take Gibbs, and it was the shocker. And personally, even with 34, it's just not fantastic value. I keep saying we heard reports, but we then heard reports that other teams in the 10 to 15 range were also interested in Gibbs. Teams were going to trade up to get Gibbs, and maybe in hindsight the value wasn't as bad as people thought or expected going into the draft. Because when we did our mock, Evan was kind of giving me a hard time for putting Gibbs in the first round and at all. So
I was.
It came out that Gibbs was much higher on people's boards than anyone had expected or thought. So maybe this wasn't bad. This was about the range he was going to go in, but you just can't justify a running back at pick 12 in 2023 if it's not a generational prospect like Bijan. I love Jahmyr Gibbs, the player. Absolutely love him. He's probably going to be one of my favorite players on this team. But the value it's just not great. And that has to be taken into account. They added pick 34, which was great. But, if I were to have to put a letter grade on this pick, it's a C minus, quite honestly. And that's me kind of being generous because he's such a talented player. I love the player, and I'm going to root for him, and I'll probably reach for him in fantasy drafts. That's how big of a fan I am of him, the player. And Ben Johnson is going to have a field day moving him around. People have been comparing him to the Lions are going to use him how Debo is used in San Francisco. He's going to play slot. He's going to play in. He's going to take the ball out of the backfield and he's going to catch passes. And anyway, it's just not a great pick. It's just not great value. But I absolutely love the player, and I won't lie, I'm extremely excited about it. So we'll start there, and I'll let Evan talk about.
I absolutely agree with your statement. So I'm gonna let Evan rip on this one.
I've been like somewhat lockstep with you, Tyler. My issue with Jahmyr Gibbs, and let's just throw back to the mock here. When my only real complaint with Jahmyr Gibbs, I kind of thought he was going to be trending towards a late first rounder. Mm-hmm. My only issue with when you took Jahmyr Gibbs was really just the team. I just didn't see it working out in Buffalo. I do think Buffalo had some interest in him, but it just didn't really make sense because James Cook and Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, similar skill sets. But, I think Jahmyr, like I said, obviously a much better player than James Cook will be. But, no, you're right. You're spot on. It's hard to see.
You're trying to balance how much you like the player with the positional value and with the reports coming out. It's
so many different things, and it's I see on Twitter, and it's how can you say a player isn't a good pick, but you really think they're going to do well? And it's that's just kind of how it is. Running backs in the first round are just odd. It's not a proven science that's worked since. The rules changed, really allowing quarterbacks to become this new, almost intergalactic being, this overlord of the offense. They're the sun of the solar system. Everything revolves around the quarterback, and the running back is probably Pluto. That's just kind of how it is. So, while I do think Jahmyr Gibbs is a phenomenal talent, and what I like more about Gibbs than Bijan is Gibbs isn't really just a running back, which makes me kind of like this pick maybe a little bit more than I initially did. Mm-hmm. You can put him in the slot, like you said. You're going to be able to shift him out wide. The two running back sets are going to be devastating with Montgomery. It's a lot of capital invested into the running back room, though, for the Lions. It's just too much for me to get behind.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you can't not be excited about what he could bring.
He's gonna be such a chess piece.
It's like it's such a conflicting.
I know.
Like
You're excited.
thought process.
You're
Like I'm
excited
excited to see him play, but I'm
The
like
draft
we
aspect,
draft
you
back
guys are
12.
like, why?
You're trying to be rational.
I am.
Analytical
but-
without being a fan.
But yeah, you're trying not to let your fan jump out. But so it's just not a pick that I can fully, say is great value. However, now that it's done with, I'm excited, and I can't wait for him to be on the team, and I'm going to get his jersey, and I'm going to draft him in fantasy drafts, and I'm going to do all that because
I'll be on alert for
and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be one of my favorite players on the team because he's going to be such a chess piece. And I wanted to say this too because we wanted to get into the mock draft reviews, but I wanted to say this too. This is an important part of what I took away from this draft. This was one of the weirdest, strangest, out of left field drafts that we're going to see in quite some time. And there were probably only 10 to 15 first round grades for teams. And so from everything we heard from Brad Holmes, Jahmyr Gibbs was one of the few players that they had a top grade on. So they just said, screw it, we're taking him because we're not going to take a second round talent at a more valuable position and pass up a first round, maybe blue chip caliber prospect in their eyes. And you saw that throughout this draft. I want to point this out too. Did we see very many future picks traded in any trade backs? Not many. Arizona got a ransom because Houston wanted Will Anderson so badly. But the reason for that is because this draft was garbage. It was not a good draft, okay? So teams were not willing to give up capital in better drafts in order to get lesser talent. You're not going to trade a one next year for a second this year when the guys you're taking in the second round are like third, fourth round grades, okay? So you have to keep all that in mind when you're looking at the Lions draft because they took the guys they were in love with, and I'm sure in another draft they would have moved around the board to get better value, but because this draft was so strange and so weird where you're just not going to get top value for trading around and moving around, and it was so unpredictable, they went to a spot where they felt like they could guarantee themselves the guy they wanted, and they took him. So although I'm still not going to convince myself that Jahmyr Gibbs was an A+ home run pick, I love the player. I love Brad Holmes' conviction in the player. So I'm not going to scream and shout because I just think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be such a great player for this team that when it's all said and done, we're not going to look back and be like, man, well, we wish we would have taken him 10 picks later. Like if he's what everyone expects him to be, then okay. Then we just got to believe in Brad Holmes' conviction.
I agree 100%. And I just pulled up the last year's draft, and the Lions had pick 12. They took Jameson Williams. But let's say, let's just play a thought process here. The next pick after J-Mo was Jordan Davis. And there wasn't a Jordan Davis available in this draft. There wasn't someone that you could, because when I was looking at this after we made the trade back and we made the pick of Gibbs, I was like, all right, who else would have taken? I'm just looking at the board, looking at who else went behind, and I would have been okay, Lucas Van Ness, that's a nice pick.
Right.
But there was no one else that really screamed out to me. I think I would have been okay with a Gonzalez.
Yeah, I would have liked Banks.
But at the end of the day, I'm I'm going to stick to my guns here. I believed that our secondary was fine. I said in the mock draft, I was like, we added secondary help. I didn't think it was a massive need in the first round. I would have been okay with taking one at 18, but I digress. I was like, I really didn't want to take one with our first pick, and we didn't. So, when I look at last year's draft, you can look at years before. You'll find guys that were in the teens that you would have been okay, if they were available in this draft, you probably would have taken them if you're Detroit, right? Someone on the interior defensive line, Jordan Davis would have been a fantastic player to plug in, but he wasn't available. You only have what's available to you. When you make a trade back, you put yourself at the risk of losing some of that talent. I do think Skoronski was one of their guys that they didn't get. When it's all said and done, Jahmyr Gibbs is probably one of the best talents in this draft. He's going to be a massive piece in their offense going forward. The running back spot is concerning in terms of, taking one this high, but, I do like what you said. The conviction from Holmes. He doesn't care about your mock drafts. He doesn't care about positional value. He's just gonna take what he wants to take. And Jahmyr Gibbs was that guy. So, I thought, at the end of the day, I was like, if Brad is if he's gonna put his balls on the table essentially with Jahmyr Gibbs, like, all right, Brad, let's see what you got. He better be he better be an all-pro running back, though. I mean, he's got to be as good as Bijan is, because Bijan was only taken 4 spots ahead of him. He's got to be pound for pound with Bijan. There's no other way around it. Like, you cannot make an excuse for Gibbs. Oh, but he's good, but he's not great. No, he's got to be phenomenal. He's got to be a top 3 back in the league.
He's got to be Alvin Kamara or Austin Eckler. He has to be. That's what he has to be
like
in order to justify.
That's like a floor.
That's the floor. In order to justify this pick, but they believe he can. So we can move on from that. But
I mean, that was really the big. That was really the big pick.
Yeah, and that's why. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that is the biggest pick. Kind of just some light thoughts on the next 3. Because I know we really want to get into this discussion. So, what are your light thoughts on
I'll
Campbell?
Start with Jack Campbell.
Yep.
I think, we're in Detroit. We hear everything about our team, and so many fans wanted a linebacker, right? And they were upset that we re-signed Anzalone. We were like, no, we don't want Anzalone. I was like, I think Anzalone's all right, but, I digress. A lot of fans were like, no, Anzalone sucks. Why do we extend him? Look, here's the thing. You cannot complain about taking the best linebacker on the Lions draft board and in the same breath complain, about
them not
addressing the position. Yeah. Exactly. They took what they believed was going to be their green dot guy, the guy that's going to be calling the plays, a leader on defense, a guy that's going to be able to help in the pass and run game, and a premier athlete. Look, I think linebacker in the first round is a bit rich, but he's going to start immediately. And he has potential to be one of the best linebackers in the NFL. And that's what he has to be to justify this pick. It's the same thing as Jahmyr Gibbs, right? They both have to be in that top
they gotta be
upper echelon. Right. They got to be Pro Bowlers. Maybe even all pro. Like, that's what we're going to need out of them. But Jack Campbell, to me, it's a position of need. He's going to help in both the run and pass game. And
he's a well-rounded linebacker.
He's a great athlete.
He's
got upside. So
I agree with you, lockstep. Just not great value, but we can move on. I'll do Sam Laporta. I honestly, when I saw this pick, I was like, really? Why didn't we take Meyer? Or why didn't we take Washington? Now, it came out after the fact. Washington had some medical red flags, and so he fell. But after I looked a little bit more into Laporta, because I really didn't know as much about Laporta as I would have liked to, so I looked into him. I actually like this pick. I'm going to be honest with you. He does a little bit of everything, except he has a lot of upside as a receiver, and he has sneaky, really good after the catch ability, which was crazy. I was watching some highlights where he was trucking guys, and he's not like the shiftiest guy, but he's got some straight line speed, he's got good vision, and he just can bulldoze guys, and he breaks tackles, and he doesn't go down on first contact. So I think this is another great chess piece. So once again, I think it's like 3 picks in a row where you're kind of like, really, we're taking these like these not super important positions, but you know what? Maybe that's why he took them, was because there was value in those positions, because other teams weren't as willing to reach on some of these guys. And so Holmes is like, in this crappy draft, I'll take all the guys that are the bad positional values because they're way higher in our board than what the valuable positions that are here. So I don't got serious problems with it, and I think he'll be a good player for us.
He went best player available. At every single pick to start off his draft, he went best player available on their board. And what I like about Laporta, which I think was not really able to be seen at Iowa because that offense was dreadful. Spencer Petras was not a good quarterback. But what you were able to see when he had the ball in his hands was his ability to get yards after the catch. And he's got great speed. He's got great agility. He tested well at the combine. He's got tremendous upside. And he offers something that Brock Wright and Shane Zylstra do not add, which is that speed, that dimension. But they're more blocking, maybe use him in the red zone. He's going to be perfect for, having that up the middle, up the seams
Yeah.
kind of threat. So I actually really liked the Laporta pick, and I think he's going to be better for this offense than a Michael Mayer would have been. And I like that they didn't, reach for. To me, it didn't feel like they reached for him because right after that, a ton of tight ends went.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with Jahmyr Gibbs at the end of the day. Like it was definitely like I don't love the positional value, but you kind of heard that like other teams wanted Gibbs, so
Yeah.
like maybe
You
it just
jumped
ended up
the
working
run-
out
the
like
run.
that.
Right,
Exactly.
all the
exactly.
runs.
And so that tells you that Brad Holmes did his homework, right? That he kind of knew where the run was going to be. He got in front of it. And so he happened to be the ones that took him. So all these other teams are like, man, we missed him. And so he's the one getting all the backlash from fans being like, you stretched. But all these other teams were probably like, man, we were really hoping we'd get him in our range. And you
Jumped everybody.
you son of
Exactly.
a gun, you got in front of us.
And speaking of doing homework, the Lions, Brad Holmes traded ahead of New England, who we said in our mock draft 1.0, Brian Branch felt like a Patriot. They trade ahead of Bill Belichick in New England, who had already invested in the cornerback position, but never doubt them adding another piece. They took Brian Branch, and phenomenal value there.
Love this pick.
This might have been one of the best picks
such a
in
good
the
pick.
entire draft for any team, and it's going to get ignored from the public because the first three picks are so loud, and it's going to get they're going to get the Lions are
And the
gonna
pick
get,
after is loud.
the Lions are going to get a lot of pushback, but I don't mean to cut you guys off, but I
you're
agree.
good.
Brian Branch is a great player. He's going to play slot corner right away, and then he also has positional flexibility to play safety. He is C.J. Gardner-Johnson, just younger and cheaper. So this might be a telltale that they don't plan to re-sign him, or they just want more chess pieces for Aaron Glenn to just move around and play all over the place.
Well,
But
this was a
you gotta love
defense
this
that
pick.
only had 2 linebackers in it. They preferred having more secondary.
3 safeties. Yeah,
So
they play a
it-
3
They loaded
safety
up in
set.
the
It makes
Yep.
total sense to add Branch, and we talked about Branch at 18. Like we said, maybe like in our mock draft, we said maybe Branch is a spot here. This could be a good spot for him. We end up taking him at 45.
Yeah.
He was mad.
That was a
and-
great pick. It was a great pick.
He wasn't
I
mad
felt-
to be
I
in
felt
Detroit.
very,
He was
I
just
was-
mad
good.
about the draft.
Respect him for sticking around and not going home like Will Levis, where he was afraid of the cameras being in front of his face. Branch wanted to be there and enjoy his moment walking across the stage. So that says something about his character too. So yeah, great pick. We all agree it's a great pick. So
Yeah.
Yeah, day one starter. The first
absolutely.
4 picks are day one starters, which I think speaks volumes. Like that, no one's
That
really
they're
just going
going
to put
for
that
it.
as a
Yeah.
baseline.
That's what
The
you should
first
be
4
going
picks
for.
are day one starters. Like they're not guys that you have to wait on. They're all guys that are ready to play right now, which I think for a team that's trying to win now, massive.
All right, before we get into our juicy next pick, what just a quick thoughts on how we did the last 3. Just like we'll see what happens. You trust Brad?
So Broderick Martin is a nose tackle through and through, and clearly they really wanted him. They traded
they
traded
lot.
3 day 3 picks where all this maneuvering that they did, because we also didn't really talk about besides the Gibbs move. They moved around quite a bit in this draft. They moved up to get Branch. They moved up to get Martin. They moved back and took Gibbs. They moved around a lot, but Martin's going to be a nose tackle, big-bodied guy, and what I think they like is they see some potential in Aleem McNeil to do a little bit more than playing nose, so they wanted to get a nose in there to free up McNeil to do some more things. So that to me that's kind of what the pick is. So we'll see. I mean, none of us know anything about him. So
No.
big body guy who's going to stop the run. So.
Outside of him being 330 pounds and like 6'5",
Yeah.
we really don't know much. His production was not something to be impressed with, but Brad Holmes with this pick saw traits and attacked them. And I think it also says something about Levi too. I don't know why that's so funny, but it's made me laugh. And then Pascal and Levi.
Yeah.
I think he's confident in those guys, and he added a 330-pound space eater in Broderick Martin. We'll see about that. Colby Sorsdahl and Antoine Green. I mean, those are late round guys, day 3 guys. We'll see how they fare.
Yeah.
Not much to speculate about those guys. We'll see.
Trust the process.
Did you
Yeah.
guys see pictures Soresville. He's a dude. He's Dan Campbell looking through and through.
Like a college Dan Campbell.
Just Dan Campbell wants a guy who's just gonna come in and just play football, and this guy he has the appearance of I just play football. So I think that I always see it. I always give Brad Holmes the benefit of the doubt with these small school guys. I mean, he brought in James Houston, where the ESPN and NFL Network guys didn't even have a draft grade on him. They didn't even really know much about him, and James Houston's one of our up and coming young players, on our defense. So I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that this is a sneaky player that they found that not many teams know about. So I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt on that.
This is what me and Evan have lived for as Patriots fans, because this is Bill mentality.
It's finding depth on the lines.
He mines those small schools, and he finds the the Kyle Duggars of the world and turns them into stars. And then so we move on to Antoine Green. Let's just be honest. None of us really know about him. We just heard what we saw on the telecast, which is that
fast,
he's a do-it-all receiver who's got some speed to him, and McShay seemed to have liked him. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe a JMO replacement during the suspension, but 7th round pick. Who knows if he even makes the team?
We jumped around, but the biggest, aside from the guys that we love locked, the biggest pick was Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. The Lions met with him very recently, and they seemed to really like him. There was a lot of talk with him. Obviously, if they didn't get one early, a quarterback, he could have been the guy. And people were hoping he didn't get. We didn't reach for him if we needed him, and he kind of fell there. And it seemed like it was the time, and they must like him. So
it really felt like we talked about it during the mock. I mentioned it. I know Evan hated it in the first, which is why I didn't put it there, because I think word for word what I said was there's quarterbacks in this draft that they like, and I think Hooker is towards the top, and they're going to take one if they see the value in it. They're not going to reach, and they're not going to trade up and jump someone to grab a quarterback, but if one of the quarterbacks that they love falls in their lap and they see it as good value there, they're going to take him, and they did. In the 3rd round, I got no problems with it, and we'll see what Evan says here in a minute. But is he going to be the future quarterback? I don't even think Detroit knows. They just took a quarterback that they liked as a floor. He's going to be a backup that is better than Nate Sudfeld. Okay, yeah. as a minimum, and that's what they took him as okay, at a minimum, we have a high upside backup quarterback that if Goff goes down, our season's not over, right? And they see his potential to possibly be the starter. They didn't draft him to be the future starter. I do not believe that is the case. They might hope that that's the case, and they probably see a world where that can be the case, and they probably see the upside and really love the player and think that he can do that. But I don't think they're banking on it, and they're not planning their roster and making future plans on him becoming it. It's kind of like if and when it happens, they'll they'll take a course of action there. Hooker's a great player, okay? He's going to be out for a little while with the injury, but it sounds like the timetable is that he'll be ready to play day one, and I'm sure the Lions are going to be extra cautious like they were with JMO, and they'll probably sit him 2 months, 3 months longer than he needs to. But he'll be ready to play this season.
They'll come back at the same time.
He'll be ready to play this season. He's got the best deep ball in the class, and you just spent a top 12 pick last year on Jamison Williams, who his top trait is running deep with that blazing, game-changing speed. Hendon Hooker is a perfect quarterback to play with him, because what does Goff do? Probably the worst is throw the deep ball. Okay, so let's just say that. He's got some mobility to him. I think they like quarterbacks that aren't run first, but they like pocket passers that provide some mobility. So if a play breaks down, he can extend the play, get outside the pocket, maybe run for some yards. That's what they want in their quarterback. Hooker does that to a T. He played in a very basic offense in college, so he's going to sit behind Goff and learn from him. And from what we saw from Hooker when he, met with, Detroit reporters, sounds like he wants to learn. He's excited to learn behind Jared Goff. So it's a great value in the 3rd round. And 20 picks later, when the 4th round started today, 5 quarterbacks went, and they were all significantly worse than Hooker. So you took him once again right in front of the herd of where the run went, and he took the best guy of the backup quality quarterbacks. But He's got the upside to be a starter, got no problems with it. I'm not saying I think he's going to be an elite player, but who knows? So we'll see what happens. Goff's the quarterback for now, and Hooker's our backup, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah. So how do I want to start? I mean, there's so many ways I could do it, but let me just say this. Let me address what I said in the mock first. So I said him and Witherspoon were my least two favorite players in the mock draft.
Forgot you said that.
Yeah, I did say that, and
I'd like to apologize.
I'm not going to apologize. I'm holding true. They're just personal reasons why. With Hooker, physically, he's ready for the NFL. He's 25 years old. That was my big complaint. That was probably my number one complaint. Was if you're going to take him in the first round, you're literally going to be deciding on his future when he is 30 years old. And so I didn't, and there was that's why I took him at 23 for the Vikings. Like there was serious. It felt like there was serious momentum for him to be a first-round pick. It didn't happen, thankfully. But, yeah, I just didn't see, having a guy under contract when your next contract to him is going to be when he's 30. Now, that was just my first complaint. So that's where I'm going to start. But I'm going to break it down a little bit. So the Lions, like Tyler said, they're able to maneuver a ton in this draft. And originally we had pick 6, 18, 48, 55, and 81. We were able to get 34. We were able to get pick 12. And then we're at 55. And I was like, all right, Amon-Ra St. Brown's about to make this pick. We trade back. And then we trade back to 63. And then I'm like, all right, Amon-Ra St. Brown's about to make this pick again. And we trade back again. So what Brad Holmes was able to do was he was able to identify, all right, I want a quarterback. I want someone to back up Goff. But I'm not going to overpay. And what did he do? He traded back twice. Not once, but he traded back twice and was able to land Hooker in the third. Now, while I don't love Hooker as a prospect, mainly because of what Tyler said, that Tennessee offense was so basic. It was so predetermined. So I have some concerns about his ability to really dissect and handle an offense when your first read isn't there and when it's not predetermined for you and when you have to make decisions on the fly. Like anyone... I shouldn't say anyone, but you can look really nice when it's kind of set up for you. And that's where a lot of Ohio State quarterbacks get their criticism from. And that's why a lot of people were critical of C.J. Stroud. But if Hooker is able to put it all together, if he's able to mature mentally with the NFL game, because I think he's a great leader. Mm-hmm. I think he has got I trust Brad Holmes when he says he's got a great presence on the field in the huddle. I think that's important. You need to be able to command the huddle. And if Brad Holmes says he can do it, I believe that's true. And physically, I mean, when you're 25 years old, you better be ready to play. Like, you shouldn't have any physical limitations. And I'm not counting the injury because it's an ACL tear, and that's very common. It's a very easy one to come back from at this point. So he should be ready to go. But when it's all said and done, he's got to be able to dissect an NFL defense. He's got to be able to manipulate those defenses, and he's got to be able to put together drives. It cannot just be this one play and done offense. That's not how it works in the NFL. That's my biggest concern with Hooker. If he can mature in that aspect, there might be a steal on our hands.
Oh, man.
There might be a steal on our hands, but I don't believe that to be the case. And like Tyler said, I don't think the Lions know if he's the future. I don't. I'm gonna err on the side of caution, and I'm gonna probably side with those who think he won't be this future quarterback of the franchise. I just do not want Hooker to prevent the Lions from selecting their guy next year or trading for a guy or doing something where, there's a chance to get what many believe and maybe even what they believe to be an elite quarterback talent, and they pass him because they might see something in Hooker. I want them to be confident and sold on their quarterback. I do not want the future quarterback to have questions. And so that's where I just get a little uneasy with Hendon Hooker. But to be able to trade back into the third round, add some more picks, which allowed us to get Broderick Martin, who I think could be a really nice piece on first and second down, I'm okay with it. Mm-hmm. but I still don't like Hooker as a player. We'll see if he's able to mature and progress, because that's where I think he can make a massive jump. A massive jump. Because you're right. Beautiful deep ball. He's got a good arm. He can move. He's got it physically. But it's, can he do it now where it's not made for him, where it's not cookie cutter, and where he can command the offense while the play's in motion and not just before the play happens in the huddle. That's what I want to see. And we won't see that for a minute because it's still Goff's team, but that's what I want to see.
So you said one thing that I do completely agree with and understand the criticism for the pick. And because I personally, I don't got a problem with the age, and I think the age is really overblown. There's, who is it? One of the top quarterbacks in this class. I'm drawing a blank. I wish I had the information in front of me, but, Levis. Levis is like 24 and some change. Like, he's pushing 25, and no one talks about that. So the age is just not a concern. The age is not a concern. Quarterbacks play until they're 40 if they're good enough. Even Ryan Fitzpatrick played well into his 40s.
You're right.
So the age just isn't a concern to me. But I will say the one concern that I can see is that the organization believes in him so much that they will pass up an opportunity to upgrade and get an elite talent because they see something in Hooker. That is a concern that I could see happening, just as they have been doing with Goff for the first few years of him being here. They've really just kind of not jumped at opportunities to go quarterback because, in the past couple of years, let's give them a little bit of a break. The roster's been garbage, so they can't go all in on a quarterback when they need that capital to build up the rest of the roster. So maybe you're not giving Brad Holmes and company credit for how he'll address things when his team is ready, championship ready, and maybe he would pull a trigger on something like that. So, but what I'm saying is I could understand that being a concern as you're maybe not superstar upside young quarterback who's maybe ceiling is what Goff is now, maybe with a little bit of mobility.
Stroud.
Being the thing that, stops you from upgrading. So I can understand that being a concern. But I truly do believe this selection was, we think and we truly believe he can be a future starter in this league. But with the capital that they spent, it's not going to kill them if it doesn't work. It was a third-round pick. So you're not blowing your future, and it's worth the risk to them because they see the talent, they see the upside, they believe in all of it, but they're not banking on it. And they're not going to plan and start making decisions now banking on it happening. They're going to wait and see what happens, and if and when it does, they'll make their decision on Goff and their future then.
And at a minimum, I think he can be a quality backup quarterback, which,
exactly,
if you live in this town, has been a complaint since Stafford was drafted
right.
in 2009, how we don't have a quality backup. So now the fans can stop complaining because we have what I will say is a quality backup quarterback, because that's genuinely what I think Hendon Hooker is. I think he is a quality backup quarterback.
And I think that's his floor. His floor is a good backup. I don't really think he's going to be out of the league in 3 years. He's completely trash, and he can't even stay on a roster. He's not like a Josh Rosen, right? Like, I think a floor is he's a high quality backup. And guess what? You spend third round picks on high quality backup. So with the capital that you spent with him, you used the capital on his floor. And I think that's why Brad Holmes took him, is you bought him with what his floor is. And if you get anything more than that, then you just got a humongous value. 20 picks later, Stetson Bennett and all these other, guys.
Tanner McGee, Aiden O'Connell.
Hayner, all those guys went. And what are those? Those are all going to be backups. None of those teams expect those guys to be starters either. So you took Hooker with the capital of being a backup, and they believe that there's upside to it. So.
And there's been several quarterbacks taken in these middle, 2, 3, 4, rounds where I think a lot of question marks were thrown at them, and they ended up, succeeding. Mm-hmm. Jalen Hurts is one, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson. These were all guys that were drafted, day 2, day 3, where, there's some concerns, there's some issues, but they find a way to get it done. And sometimes it's not necessarily that they're super talented, but they got a good team around them, and they're able to make plays when they need to. And that's kind of where I think Hendon Hooker might be kind of like a Russell Wilson type. Not the same player, but maybe they have the same effect on the team. And so that's where I can see like a little upside with Hendon Hooker. But when you have Jared Goff, Hendon Hooker is not going to play this year as a starter unless Goff goes down. So that's another thing. Like in the third round last year, the Lions took Kirby Joseph, pick 97, and he's a legitimate starter on this defense. I'm not sure if there was anyone else at 68 that the Lions were considering, but that's the other aspect of it is, was there a guy close to or maybe a little bit below or above their grading scale with Hendon Hooker that could help them out right now? We don't know, and we're not going to know. But what we do know is they liked Hendon Hooker enough to take him here at 68, and now they've solidified that backup quarterback position. They have him for $850,000 a year, which is great, as opposed to, I would have loved to pay Teddy Bridgewater knowing what I have in a backup quarterback and knowing he's going to be healthy to start the year, but it's a cheaper option with some upside. I see the philosophy behind it. I still don't love the player, but at least it's not Hendon Hooker in the first round or the second round. It's the third round, and they're able to get capital and trade back into the third round and take a Broderick Martin, who they loved. So, in context, it's not that bad. But if it was just Hendon Hooker at 18 or Hendon Hooker at 34 or Hendon Hooker at 50 or 45 or 48, yeah, I probably would have reacted differently than I am right now. I'm not as mad or as upset about the pick as I thought I would have been. But that's because of Brad Holmes' ability to maneuver and ability to make moves happen. And that's what he did. I think if this was Bob Quinn, we probably are sitting there at 6 taking someone we don't want. We're sitting there at 18 taking someone we don't want. It's just one of those deals where Brad Holmes' genius was able to manufacture more players, more picks, more potential. And even if you didn't love the value for some of the players, there's an understanding behind it now as the dust has settled that I think you can get behind.
Enough said.
Any thoughts, Justin? I mean, me and Tyler have been
hogging the mics.
My throat is dry. I need you to say something.
I just let you guys ride. I like Hooker. I agree. I do think that is I think that is probably the biggest concern, which you both have stated, is that they may like him too much where they could pass on the next generational talent that they need. I definitely think he can be the guy. I'm not putting it past him at all. I think the abilities he has is kind of what they'd want in the quarterback of like the future, but we'll see what happens, especially if they want to keep Goff in some form. How much do they really believe in Hooker at that point? Who is next available, depending on the next, one of the next two drafts? Where's our stock at that point? How far do we get? Do we make a playoff run this year? There's a lot of different factors, but I like the pick, honestly. But I don't think right off the bat, I don't think he's the quarterback of the future for us. But I believe he can be. Mm-hmm. So plain and simple with that.
So moving on from Hooker, there was one other thing the Lions did on draft weekend, and
yes,
it included one of their star players, possibly
for a time.
DeAndre Swift was traded on day 4 of the draft. During the draft, he was dealt for a pick swap of 7th rounders this year and a 2025 4th rounder. And I wanted to know, how we felt about it, because personally, Justin knows I'm a massive DeAndre Swift fan, just like I'm going to be a massive Jahmyr Gibbs fan. They have the same. I love that style of back. I just do. And you've seen the highlights that Swift provided for us, and you just saw that he had superstar potential. But I understand why the team moved on, because the team moved on not because of what he did on the field, but because his ability to get on the field, and possibly some questions about him the person, because we know how important the people are to Holmes and Campbell. And it kind of sounded like Swift just didn't have that dog in him. That's really the best way.
Witherspoon dog.
That's really the best way to describe it. It just sounded like they believed that he had all the potential in the world, and Deuce Staley did everything in his power to get it out of him. But he just, would run out of bounds 5 yards, 2-3 yards earlier than he probably needed to. He could have put his shoulder down, fought for extra yards.
Which also could have been a factor due to the consistent injury. He's
Yeah,
always concerned.
like he's trying to protect himself, might not be looking out. I don't know. I don't want to put words into the mouth of the team, but it just sounded like the person, they just thought that he could have been so much more, and he was cool with just kind of relying on his talent. And when he was not feeling 110%, he wanted to sit out of practice and sit out of games, and the team just felt like everyone's hurt throughout the season. We all kind of battled through small little things, and Swift just wasn't one of those guys who wanted to. So they moved on to, a very similar type of back who might have all those traits between the ears. So anyway, I'm sad to see Swift go, and I just wanted to bring him up because I was a big fan of him, and I wish him the best in Philly. I do think he can be a superstar back in this league, but he might just not be a guy that you can count on as your A1 back. So
I have nothing really to say about Swift. I really fell out of favor with him. I loved him when we took him, but you could tell, the writing was kind of on the wall.
yeah,
Swift, just his future wasn't with the franchise anymore. I'm honestly relieved to see a Quinn Trisha-era player go. That draft was dreadful. That was the Okuda draft. The only player still left from the Quinn Trisha regime from that draft, I believe, is Jonah Jackson. Just a ridiculously bad draft, and it was the last, little, like that was really it. So, no,
he passed on Jonathan Taylor.
It's just remarkable, criminal, disgusting. That was 3 words to describe that era of Lions football. But you got Gibbs. There was no room for Swift. You signed Monty. It just made too much sense. And now this 2-headed backfield of Monty and Gibbs is going to be Kamara and Ingram from early NOLA days. With that kind of thunder and lightning combo, I mean, it's just going to be ridiculously entertaining to watch. So Swift really had no role on this team, and I think the Lions got good value for him. I know the pick is down the road, but a 2025 fourth rounder, I mean, I'll take that any day over a pick in the 210s.
And you're not going to pay him. You're not going to pay him.
You weren't going to pay him. He's heading into his last year.
It just made sense.
And you're right, Evan. I was just trying to talk about how much I liked him, but you are completely right, and I saw it too. The writing was on the wall. This staff lost faith in him. They gave him all the opportunities to be the go-to when they brought in Deuce, and they gave him all the confidence that you're going to be the top guy, and Jamal's kind of going to be the relief valve, the short yardage back. And then what did we see throughout the season? Swift was hurt. He didn't have that dog in him, and guess who did? Jamal Williams had that
He had the coaching staff's trust.
Yeah, he had that wolf in him. Was what Jamal had. He had the
Super Saiyan.
Even though he
Literally.
didn't have the talent that Swift did, he had the character and the attributes that they were looking for in a back. And so the writing was on the wall. They moved on from Swift. And so I just wanted to bring it up, and good luck to Swift in Philly.
I know. I think he can be great, but yeah, healthy. We'll see. I think Rashad Penny will get most of the carries there, but
we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, it's interesting. Their backfield is a little makeshift on the fly. I thought they drafted a running back, but they didn't.
That reminds me of the Jamal Swift backfield, as they got Penny Swift.
I mean, the Saints have Kamara and Jamal now, so
and Kendry Miller.
Yeah.
Oh yeah! Wow. So.
Yeah.
Jamal might not be getting as much time as he thinks.
Yeah.
Is Kamara serving his suspension this year?
Hasn't been handed out yet.
We'll see when if he ever gets it.
Yeah.
But
they're quick to suspend JMO, but still waiting on that Kamara suspension.
Before we close it out here, quick say of who you thought had a great draft or who didn't.
So my top 3 favorite drafts, I feel like we'll just put it there. Maybe my top 3 favorite and my top 3 least favorite. I thought the Bills had a great draft. Not a ton of quantity with their picks, but I thought they nailed every single one of them. When you get Dalton Kincaid, when you get Osiris Torrance, when you finish it, I shouldn't say finish it off, but in the third round, they added Dorian Williams, who was one of my favorite linebacker prospects. Great speed out of Tulane. Tulane bias, but really I think he's going to be a nice Tremaine Edmonds replacement. I love their draft. I love the Steelers draft. I thought they basically nailed every pick they had. In the first round, you get Broderick Jones. In the second round, you get JPJ. They get Darnell Washington. They get Herbig. Just a really solid draft for the Steelers. And then my third favorite was probably, I'm gonna do it. I think the Patriots had a really good draft. They revamped that defense. They fortified it with Christian Gonzalez, Marte Mapu, Keon White. The special teams has been rebuilt, adding to the offensive line, adding a first-round talent that some believed at the beginning of the year in Kayshon Boutte in the sixth round. Really just one of the drafts where I think Belichick kind of hit it out of the park. I've been a little critical of the Patriots drafts as of late. I thought he did nicely here. I'll throw an honorable mention to the Packers as well. They got my boy Lucas Van Ness, Jaden Reed. Well. They revamped that offense completely. Least favorite, I think it goes without saying, the Atlanta Falcons had a horrible draft. I cannot get behind what they did. I thought the Niners, that was pretty shocking to go Jake Moody in the third round. I don't think they did well, if I'm going to be honest. When you trade everything for Trey Lance and you have nothing to show for it because you're probably going to trade Trey Lance.
But what do you need?
That's a yikes. It doesn't even matter because, they don't need anything, but they don't have anything because of that.
Rookie contracts.
Exactly. We've seen what happened with the Rams.
Yeah.
And then probably least favorite out of those other than that, the Jets just didn't really do much. To surround
aside
Rodgers.
From your boy Israel.
Yeah, they got Izzy, but they didn't really do much else. They took Will McDonald when they wanted Jahmyr Gibbs and or Broderick Jones. They didn't get either. I think it's kind of a failure on the front office there. So top three favorite, top three least favorite. That's enough said from me.
I'll just mention one team, and then I'll just name a couple of picks that I liked. So we didn't mention the Eagles. You have to give credit to the Eagles for what they did. I mean, Jalen Carter, we already talked about it. Had to have been a team that made sense. They were one of them. Nolan Smith, we talked about it. Great value. I mean, why did he fall? Who knows? But great value. A lot of people say that he could replace Hassan Reddick, with that speed and ability to blitz. They got Sidney Brown. They added Keely Ringo. They got Tanner McKee to back up, Jalen Hurts. So that was a great draft. A couple of picks that I liked. You mentioned a couple of them, so I won't go back to it. But Adetome Miwa Adebaware, Indianapolis Colts, was a great pick in the fourth round. I thought that he was a second-round player. I thought he was an early second-round player. Could have even snuck into the first round, but they got him in the fourth round. That's a great value in my opinion. Kendre Miller for the Saints, we already talked about it. That's a great value pick right there. I think he's going to play really well. He's a great back. Jaden Reed for the Packers, opposite of Christian Watson. I think that's going to be a great receiver, to pair with him for Jordan Love. Dion Henley for the Chargers. I thought that was a great value in the third round. And then
Can we believe the Packers took two tight ends? Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I actually really like that they did that.
Yeah.
Because you might as well surround Jordan Love with as much as you can.
I think probably the best value pick in the whole draft, Deuce Vaughn in the 6th round by Dallas Cowboys. I mean, he could be a day one starter. I mean, we won't have to go crazy about it. I can tell Evan's a fan of it too.
I like Deuce Vaughn, and great special teamer.
I mean, that's Justin's boy. So.
Yeah, he's got the helmet. He's got the Deuce helmet, throwback K-State logo.
So those are a couple picks that I liked. So I mean, a couple ones that I didn't like. Didn't like the Jake Moody pick. Who's the quarterback that the Packers took? Sean Clifford? Are you kidding me?
That was the one pick the Packers made that I was like, what are you doing?
Undrafted grade for most people, and he went above quarterbacks like Max Duggan.
No comparison.
I
know.
What
I can't believe
doing here?
Max Duggan didn't get drafted.
No, he did.
Did he? Where'd he go?
He went to the Chargers.
Wow.
But the Packers did take Carrington Valentine.
Yeah.
That's an all-name team kind of guy.
Oh, yeah, baby.
That's an all-name team.
I think that is a dub that Max Duggan got taken by the Chargers. Mind you, we were filming this the very end of the last round of the draft was going on, so I think that's a dub for the Chargers and Duggan. That's a good backup.
Any winners, losers, favorite picks from you, Justin?
Winners for me, I think Houston at the end of the day.
Nice.
Houston, Arizona, absolutely. Who else did I love?
I mean, how can you not love the Houston Texans
I
coming
know.
away with the two best
I agree with
players?
Steelers. Absolutely with you.
Yeah.
They got it done. They did. They took some names. That
Such
did
a Steelers draft.
I don't think the names aren't there, but I really think Tampa is doing just enough smart things to try and get past this post Brady era. I think there's a lot more to do, but I think they did some right things in this draft.
They didn't do anything stupid.
Exactly.
Like, they didn't do anything that made me say, what? What was that? No, they did. I think they did fine.
A little shout out to the Giants. Deontay Banks late in the first round. I thought he could have went as early as 10 or 12. I would have been comfortable taking him. John Michael Schmitz. People viewed as one of the best.
Schmitz.
Yeah, people viewed him as one of the best interior offensive linemen in the class. They got him in the second round. Jalen Hyatt they got in the third round, which he's a speedster and he might not be a polished receiver yet, but to get him in the third round and we projected him in the late first. I mean, that's got to be good value. So you got to give him credit. For that draft as well.
I think Washington had a bad draft.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of forgot about the Commanders. That was a brutal draft.
Yeah, that wasn't a great draft by
I feel
the
like,
Commanders.
I don't know, I forget, them and Atlanta are my two bottom tier teams.
I would say the Niners and the Commanders had the biggest
I'll add
garbage
Niners there,
draft.
even though I love the Niners.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't need a kicker. Yeah, Moody's great, but why'd you signed Robbie Gold? And he's great.
Gold retired.
I thought we signed him.
Nah, he retired, but
when?
Still.
I'm off the chart.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Still, pick 99.
He's not worth a third-round pick. I don't even think you even think about taking Moody until like the early fifth.
Could have been the Pats and took the boy from Maryland.
Yeah, Chad Ryland in the fourth round. I mean, I'm not going to defend it crazy. I still think that was a tad early, and they trade up to get him. But hey, Bill wanted his place kicker. He's got him. I'm not going to complain if he's automatic from the spot there. But Anthony Richardson, didn't really mention him.
Oh,
going to the Colts. I think he's going to be a stud. In that division now with C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis eventually, and Anthony Richardson, that should be fireworks. That should be exciting. That is a complete integration of youthfulness there at the quarterback position. It's going to be fun to watch.
Hopefully that division isn't garbage anymore.
No, I think now you actually have some primetime games that you're going to be like, whoa, Stroud versus Lawrence? I'm tuning into that, right? We just haven't had that in the AFC South for so long, which, now it might be the must-see division going forward.
So one more thing before we close. Why don't we give a final letter grade for the Lions? I know we don't love letter grades, but let's just do it for fun. A final general grade for the whole draft for the Lions. Do you want to circle back?
Because of the guys that I like, are we going off based on what we really think?
Yeah.
Or to me,
your thoughts.
To me, it's a very low B-.
Okay.
I know you guys are probably more like C's.
No, I'm gonna go with a B. I'm gonna go with a B. It's my least favorite Brad Holmes draft of the three, but it's the win now draft. And what I respect about Brad Holmes is he stayed true to himself. And while I don't love the value for some of our picks, value, the big word.
Villain. That's the big word.
But he stuck to what he believed in. He stuck to his board, and he made his picks without hesitation, without being scared. And I think that's what I respect the most about this draft. And it's not maybe so much the players we got, but it's more so the thought process and the philosophy behind them. So I'm going to give him a B for that, because I do think Brad Holmes was like, this is my draft. We're going for it now. And if you don't like it, I don't care. And I respect that. So I appreciate that from Brad Holmes.
I'm going to give it a a flat C. I love the players, but yeah, I mean, it's just
Hate the value.
didn't like the value. And even if that's the range they were going to go in, maybe you don't get a blue chip running back. You go back and you get Vaughn in the 5th round instead of the 6th, right? I mean, there were ways he could have played it. He could have played this draft better. And so I completely agree with you, and throughout the course of this podcast, I've made it very clear that I like a lot of the players that they took, and I completely understand what Brad's doing, but I'm just going to give it a flat C. But I believe a lot in the players that we took, and especially Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that he's going to change the game of this offense in a way that Swift never could. So
I did not think I'd have like the highest letter grade in the Lions
that's what
draft,
I was laughing about.
but I don't know.
I'm in that range. B minus. That's my range.
It's not even so much like who we drafted. I just think if you're gonna go for it, go for it. Like, don't beat around the bush. Don't have one foot in.
He has the confidence.
He's got the confidence. He said, "We need someone now." And those first 4 picks symbolize that. And then that 5th pick in Hendon Hooker, I don't love the player, but you know what? He wanted someone to back up Goff with some upside. And like, if you remove Hendon Hooker and you just give me that sentence, I'd be like, okay, I can get down with that. Mm-hmm. Now, I still don't love taking a QB in the 3rd, and I hope it doesn't prevent them from going after their guy in the future, but we shall see.
My trust level in Brad Holmes is still an A+, so I got
agree.
no doubts there.
I don't think it will. I don't think I'll ever doubt him.
I think I overreacted initially. Now the dust is settled, and calm down. It's a B. It's a B draft. But the past 2 drafts have been like an A. So,
but the value of this draft has also been a D.
But I think when everyone's questioning your draft, I think you're doing something. Like, I think you might be doing something right. Like, when everyone's like, what are the Lions doing? I think you might be onto something.
I heard something on the radio on my way over here, and I like the way they said it. They said that while the rest of the NFC North is zigging, Brad Holmes is zagging. So
it's a total zag. This draft was a total zag.
If you really want the division, and it's up for the it's
right now
there
it's up
for the taking. He took his guys to get him there, so you got to trust him.
Ride the wave.
Roll wave.
Well, that was another long one. Not too long like the last one, but we hope you guys.
Long, but it doesn't matter.
It's a good draft analysis.
People eat up the draft.
They do, and so it's a 1-2 punch right here.
And we don't have football. This is it. We don't have football for a while now.
Yeah, not until we hit not until we hit preseason.
This is what you get when you bring me on to chat with Evan. When it's just you two, you can kind of be quiet when he goes on his debates to kind of, or goes on his rants
I just
to
let it ride.
Keep the time going. But when it's both of us, we go on each other, and it's hard to balance 2 chatterboxes. So
it's okay.
Yeah,
Enough content for me, and I can just let
Justin's
it ride.
the perfect captain. He's the perfect captain. Yeah, I mean, you should have seen the group chats. It was crazy. We were going off. We were going off. We were so.
I'm just watching Evan going back and forth.
It was like a seesaw. I was all over the place.
Zigging and zagging.
I was zigging and zagging. Yeah. No, Brad Holmes definitely zagged this draft. Upside down. Just craziness. But what a fun weekend it was.
It was.
Draft's always never fun. Disappoints. Even if you don't love, what your team did. At the end of the day, it's the NFL draft, and it's fun, it's exciting, and it's the football, that we have till real football.
So it's back. Well, that's all she wrote. That's the 2023 NFL draft, the recap, analysis, everything you could ask for. We're ready for a new season. It's a couple months away, but we're ready. High hopes for the Lions. If you are listening or watching, thank you again. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, turn on those post notifications, likes, hit the thumbs up button. Give us some comments. What did you think of the draft? Did your team get what you want? Do you like Hendon Hooker if you're a Lions fan?
Yeah, give your opinion. Give your opinion on the draft. Let's start some conversations in the comments. Maybe I'll hop in there and talk to some of you guys. Tell you why you're wrong.
Yes.
Get it going. Get the people going. But thank you guys for listening. It's been another great episode of Squeeze the Juice. We'll see you next week. Peace.